Hey, my name is Tom and welcome back to Low Carbon Lifestyle. Most of the videos I make for this channel tend to be about the way that we can use technology in reducing our emissions, the tech side of the climate emergency challenge. And that's where I am most comfortable. I'm an engineer who's been working on decarbonising the built environment for a good part of my career. But I'm beginning to realise that there's a big blind spot in my experience and in my perspective, something that could affect all of us and is the other side of the climate change coin. In this video, I'm going to explore a little bit of the world of biodiversity. My name is Tom, and this is a little series about a low carbon lifestyle. So where do we start with this stuff? Maybe with some honesty. I am no ecologist, and for years I've been part of conversations around sustainability, and to some extent I've belittled the parts about nature. My perspective has been that wildflower meadows aren't going to stop climate change, that we need a drastic change in how we heat and power our buildings and how we get around and how we manufacture the things that we use. I was even someone who, a couple of years ago, would tell anyone that listened that I was at war with the dandelions in our garden. I was one of those, look how strong and diligent and committed I am. I'm going to have a completely weed-free lawn. And if it takes me the next 5 years, I'm up for it. I would dig the dandelions out. I would spray them a weed killer. They'd grow back. I'd dig out some more. I'd spray them some more. They'd grow back. With absolutely no care about what I was spraying, or actually the benefit that those little plants could have had to the wider nature around me. And then the more I read about the wider climate change challenge, the more I listen to other practitioners in this field, I start to realize that we need both and. We need the drastic step change in our emissions that the technology could provide, and we need to do something drastic to prevent biodiversity loss. At the moment, both seem to be spiraling out of control. So why the change in heart? What's made me consider biodiversity for the first time? Well, I think there are a few things. First of all, the facts of what is happening. Then actually the benefits of what we could have if we took this seriously. And then I've really got into some storytelling by people who know all this stuff much better than I do. So let's have my fairly simplified introduction to biodiversity. So let's start with that first question. What is happening? Well, the stats are fairly shocking, and I'd encourage you to search around about this yourself. But some of the stats that I found include that the UK has lost almost half its biodiversity since the 1970s. The RSPB suggests that 15% of the remaining species in the UK are threatened with extinction. The Natural History Museum reports that overall 41% of wildlife species in the UK have declined. That 26% of mammals in the UK are at risk of extinction. That 22% of bird species have declined. And we also read that hedgehogs and turtle doves have declined by 95% and 98% respectively. And what are the causes of this? Well, one of them being the loss of wild places for nature to thrive. An example being that we've lost 97% of wild meadows in the UK. What I can't really comprehend is that there are species that were alive when I was born that aren't now. That just seems crazy. When we think about extinction, I think about the dodo or the dinosaur, but it's happening right under our nose because of our actions too. From the smallest insects to large mammals, the way that we run the world around us has put species at risk. So that's what's happening. Because of our land management, because of the use of pesticides, because of the use of fertilizer, the industrialization of our farmland, because of the removal of habitat like hedgerows, because we've developed wilderness, we're now putting species at risk. And in doing so, we're risking our own future. When insects are killed en masse by pesticides, we start to lose the pollinators that would have helped our plants and lots of our food that we rely on grow. When fertilizer is used on a field, it changes the chemical composition of that field, and the biological makeup of the soil, eventually making it almost impossible to grow on. And then more than that, the fertilizer also remains in the system around us and around the field. And it could impact the water around us. It could kill rivers. It risks breeding ground for fish. It can provoke algal blooms in rivers. Our food system is contributing to the loss of wildlife all around us. And if nature isn't thriving, then we really do risk our own health as well. I read a booklet on biodiversity recently that started by saying, the loss of biodiversity has been likened to loosening rivets on a plane wing, with each rivet being the loss of one species. Losing a few rivets makes little difference to the stability of the wing. However, there comes a point when enough rivets are lost to destabilize the whole thing and to doom the passengers on board. That's a bit like our biodiversity. Losing one or two things doesn't have much impact, but it comes to a point where losing biodiversity risks making our food system fall apart. Because we rely on nature for our everyday essentials, we really should be cherishing the natural world because we can't survive without it. So we should work to rebuild it, shouldn't we? What would we get if we rebuilt biodiversity? It seems obvious that a world with more diverse nature would be a more enjoyable place to live. We would be happier. But also biodiversity has practical benefits too. Healthy ecosystems can help filter water, prevent flooding. They can ensure that nutrients are maintained in the earth around us so we can keep on growing food. A biodiverse landscape means that we can also thrive. And as well as those practical things, there are impacts on our mental and physical health too. It's been shown that experiencing nature can help have positive effects on mental health, on our heart rate, on our concentration, our levels of stress, and on our blood pressure. So protecting biodiversity and restoring it is not just so that we can let wildlife thrive, and that's great. It's actually also selfishly for our own benefit. So where has all this come from? What have I been inspired by? Well, I've been doing a bit of reading, and I've been particularly inspired over the last few months by reading books by James Rebanks, a farmer in the Lake District working to renew and restore a small part of Cumbria with nature-conscious farming techniques. I enjoyed reading this on Christmas Day. Tamsin Oman's book from the Do Lectures, Do Earth, which is outlining what the situation is and what we could do about it. And then David Attenborough's book, which is absolutely amazing, and his witness statement on how the world has changed in his lifetime. I got Greta's book, the climate book, which is massive. I've not read it all at all, but it's her overview on everything to do with climate change. It includes some stuff around biodiversity. I'm currently reading George Monbiot's book, Regenesis, about halfway through, and the stories that he tells about farms that he visits, Ian Tolhurst's farm and the community orchard that he starts in. I've also read Isabella Tree's book about wilding at the Nep estate. That's really exciting and interesting. There's loads out there. And closer to home, the work of the ecology team at Durham County Council, who declared a ecological emergency for the county and are putting an action plan together in place to try and halt biodiversity loss and restore biodiversity that is natural to our county in Durham. Or then the Durham University team that have just launched their biodiversity strategy that outlines what the university and the city looks like in terms of nature. There's so much happening in the UK and further afield that is trying to prevent biodiversity loss and trying to reverse the story, because it's the right thing to do, it's the ethical thing to do, but because also we are going to rely on nature to take out CO2 from the atmosphere and the diversity of nature to grow enough food for us all to survive. So I've come this far from a weed-killing fool to a growing passion to help restore biodiversity. And because I've got some of that passion, I want to take some action. Our garden backs onto some farmers' fields. I've no idea whether they are using sustainable farming practices, but if they're using lots of fertilizer or pesticides, I'm going to do my best to give a tiny bit of respite for nature just over the fence. This spring and into the summer, I'm going to work to make sure our little garden is as nature friendly as it can be. That means letting the grass grow a bit long and maybe to some extent, to some people, a bit scruffy. so that pollinators and bees can gather food early in the season. Last year I did No Mow May, and it was amazing how alive the grass was with bees, finding lots of different flowers, and we even spotted some real wild beasts in the long grass. Our dog Asher. So as well as letting the grass grow, I'm going to dig in a pond. I'm going to plant native plants that would thrive in ponds in this part of the world, and I'm ultimately going to see what happens. In the university's biodiversity strategy, it states that there are no records of reptiles across the university estate at all, and that mirrors the situation in the Durham City area. So what can we do to change that? Well, it starts with creating new ponds. I'm going to give it a go, and I'm going to see what moves in. I'm also going to build bug hotels. I'm going to make sure I don't use any artificial fertilizer that could really hurt the ground around us, or weed killers or pest killers. I'm going to keep listening to the experts around me to make sure that I'm doing all I can. So where do I finish on all this? Well, climate change and biodiversity loss are two sides of the same coin. We need to work hard to reduce both. Reduce our emissions in our communities, as well as making our communities more friendly to the world around us. I do have some understanding of how to reduce emissions, and I'm learning more and more about how to make our communities more friendly for nature. So here's the challenge. What could you do this spring or summer where you live? Is there anything that you could do in your garden? If not, could you ask your local council to leave mowing the verges until the end of May? Or ask them what they're doing to improve biodiversity? Could you maybe get involved to clean up a local pond or to save a wildflower meadow? What do you think? How are we going to restore what we've lost? I'll keep you informed about how the pond goes.